Hi everyone, I'm really very excited that Irenosen Okojie, I hope I've said that right, Okojie has agreed to be here with me, and we're just going to chat about her work. Her book just came out in November of last year, so only a few months ago, but she has 2 other wonderful works of fiction too. I'm going to tell you a little bit about her if you don't know about her already. She's a Nigerian-born British writer, and her debut novel, Butterfly Fish, won a Betty Trask Award and was shortlisted for an Edinburgh International First Book Award. Her work has been featured all over the place. She has an absolutely fabulous story collection, Speak Gargantula, that was shortlisted for the Edge Hill Short Story Prize, the Jackler Prize, the Saboteur Awards, and nominated for a Shirley Jackson Award. And basically, what hasn't she done? She was recently inducted as a Fellow of the Royal Society of Literature, which is pretty exciting. 40 Under 40 initiative. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
This is Nudie Branch. So one of the things I wanted to ask you at first was this is very exciting to have these 2 people on the front of your book.
No, it's wonderful. It's kind of a blessing, really.
Yeah.
And they both kind of, I've known them both for a while. They've both kind of been in and around. As you see people on the literature scene, you get to know them.
Yeah.
And it's just really lovely to be championed by them. You never know who's going to take to your work or support it. So it's a pretty big deal, and Bernadine in particular has been supportive of loads of people.
Yes.
She's all about community and bringing people along with her, which is wonderful. But it's just nice that she had that response to the work.
Yeah, it's really exciting.
Yeah.
And Ben Okri as well is also pretty major.
Well, yeah, he's no small fish, and he championed me a while back through a Spread the Word event and selected one of my stories, as a story that he was really excited about. And I did an event with him, and he introduced my work, talked about why he liked the story. So, yeah, all of that was pretty surreal at the time. But, it's just lovely. I think it's just lovely validation for the writing as well, because, as you know, we're often just sort of writing alone, really. You're quietly just sort of plugging away, and you send stuff out, and sometimes you get rejected, and sometimes you don't. So, when these things happen, it's really encouraging. So, yeah.
I mean, I definitely feel that he's also. I was going to ask you one thing that for me kind of came out of this collection in particular, and in fact, actually, your novel as well. So you're really interested, I think, in things becoming other things, and this kind of, sense of metamorphosis and transformation, and that feels like he's also interested in that. So do you think that was one of the reasons that he picked up on your work? Or, don't just want to talk about him, to be honest.
I have no idea. It would be really interesting, I guess, to ask him on reflection.
Yeah.
You never know what someone sees in the writing, but I think he enjoyed the playfulness of it.
Yes.
Somebody that wasn't afraid to do something different with language. And in terms of metamorphosis, that's a subject matter that I'm really quietly interested in, and it seems she says, it seems to manifest in my stories quite a bit, and I think that comes from the fact that I haven't necessarily had the easiest personal life, so difficult family circumstances. My family are amazing, but no one has it easy, and a lot of difficult things have happened, so writing really has been a space for me to sort of inject all of that into. So I think this idea of taking trauma and making it something else, or getting something out of that process or that feeling, is really, really fascinating. And how that manifests in the work is not something that you actively plan necessarily, because the work is an investigation. I might be in Butterfly Fish, I was writing about a young woman who lost her mother, and she is vulnerable, and she's really struggling with her mental health, but her mental health almost becomes this sort of, otherworldly space. And sometimes you can't separate what is actually real and what is actually in her imagination. You know what I mean? So I feel like it's a really fertile space, the writing, to kind of explore all those themes, really.
Yeah, and actually, as you say that, I'm thinking, I've just been rereading lots of Greek myths with my kids, and been thinking about this idea of metamorphosis and all of the stories of the gods being weirdly born from strange bits of semen in the ocean and people's heads and all that stuff. You're like, wow, and it
That's-
often does actually come from quite a dysfunctional place.
Yeah.
You know, let's break our way out of a man who ate us, which is interesting.
Oh, I love the sound of that.
That there's all this, you know, kind of. That I think that myth is very much rooted, weirdly, in family. I think. So maybe that's.
Absolutely, and family is fascinating. You know, families and how they operate or how they don't operate is really interesting. And I mean, my family is sort of fragmented. You know, I have relatives in Nigeria, relatives here, relatives in Canada, relatives in the States. So maybe that's why it has that, I guess, broad field. The work has this.
Yeah,
and
it's placed is in so many different places geographically.
Yeah, absolutely. So all of those influences, I think, come into it to maybe create a really kind of, I would say, like kaleidoscopic aesthetic almost, where it has lots of different influences.
It definitely feels like that, and it feels like that in a very literary way as well. So like, there are definitely quite a lot of different genres in here. You could say, oh, that's sci-fi, that's fantasy, and I wonder what you thought about the idea of genre as a thing, because I feel like I really enjoy the way that you kind of blend it all together, but I didn't know how you felt about that.
Well, I think it's funny because I never think about my work in terms of genre, especially the stories. Maybe that's why I seem to touch on different genres, because I think for me the most intriguing writing is writing that sits in between different spaces or blends different genres together. And through that you can create interesting context and unusual language and unusual imagery. It sort of just gives you that fire, I think, to produce something a little bit different. So I never actively think about genre. I think about ideas. Ideas excite me.
So happy to hear that.
Ideas excite me, and then I just write them, and see what happens. And I never actively plan diligently, this is what the story is going to be. I have the idea roughly. I think, I might want to investigate, a woman coming from the sea on an island of eunuchs, and but I think it's also funny and also rooted in reality. Even if it's quite mythic and otherworldly, because it is essentially about loneliness, and a woman looking for love, and nobody quite being the right fit. And haven't we all gone through that kind of experience? So while I do create these sort of fantastical worlds, I think a lot of the time they're also grounded in reality as well. So that combination is really fascinating.
I was thinking of the one where they're going on the paintballing.
Oh yeah.
And it kind of starts out so. Almost just like kind of contemporary sort of, and then suddenly we end up in these people turning into werewolves, I guess. And so there's a kind of, I don't know, there's all kinds of things going on in there, but it also feels like it does come from a very rooted beginning. So you were like, whoa!
Yeah, I'm constantly sort of trying to disconcert the reader, I think.
But you do that in your language as well. Like some of your language is really. I was just reading on the way to meet you, just reading again, and this one sentence just struck me. It was bright out, the day was alcoholic. And you know exactly what you mean.
Oh, I'm glad.
Without kind of like needing to give us, but it doesn't feel like, oh, I've read that loads of times before. And I teach creative writing, and I think that if I were teaching someone like you, I would actually really struggle. And I wondered what you felt about encouraging people to be experimental with their language, because I think it's quite difficult to teach that. Like, it's quite easy to teach a sort of contemporary realism. That's sort of where creative writing leans in its easiness. And just wanting, it's just, I don't know, and I almost feel like actually in England, in general, in the publishing industry, we're not very supportive of people writing in that kind of energetically linguistic kind of, just like trying to wrench something a bit new and different.
I've been told that before, and it's interesting that you pick up on that. I think obviously if people want to do creative writing courses as a structure, sometimes you need that, you know, as a way of learning, you know, the tools and skills, and then you can do something different with them. But I confess I never actually did a creative writing course.
But I know you teach.
But I do workshops, you know, so, but I love the workshop space, because to me, the workshop space is not about teaching a prescribed way of writing. That's why it suits me. I'm not sure I would make a good creative writing tutor, because I think that's because it's a slightly different thing, you know. But I love the workshop space because it's about, you know, seeing things in people and giving them permission to write about things that they may always have wanted to write about. And permission is huge because, you know, people come to these workshops often not thinking that they're very interesting, but then you get them talking, because part of my workshop is like conversational in the beginning, just to get to know each other a bit, and then all these wonderful things come out, and suddenly the ice is broken, and suddenly they start thinking about, you know, things that happen to them that they've buried and they might want to explore, and they get excited about what they could do, you know. So all of that is really interesting. But I always say, you know, find your own voice, because, you know, don't follow what you think might be the popular thing, or because I've always avoided that. You know, I've always done my own thing. I have a love of literature, a love of language, and I've always been interested in doing stuff that's slightly subversive. So so that means that I read all sorts. You know, I've read. I think that
it feels clear.
I mean, I love books, so I'm not a snob. You know, I read everything as a teenager and as a kid. I read everything from, you know, Roald Dahl was one of the first books I read, and I think you can see that in my work in a way.
Also likes transformation.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and like very funny writer as well. You know, when I think of Fantastic Mr. Fox and the kind of cheekiness of that, and also like, I love the fact that he talked about revenge. You know, if people did you wrong, you could explore what that was like. You know, and also his books again. It's like, is it children's fiction, or but it's for adults too, right? You know, you've very much got that sense. So he was doing that as well, which I really love. So I try, I think, to say, write about what interests you, play with your writing. You know, when I first started properly like writing fiction, I was reading poetry a lot.
I was going to say that I feel there's a lot of poetry in your work. Do you write it as well as read it?
I do. I write these like strange little prose poems that I never show people, but I just have loads and loads of notebooks of them, and little, because it just, for me, that keeps me tethered to the writing. So and I'm an image maker, you know, so I'm always making images in these little books that I carry around with me, and that makes me feel open somehow, you know. And also I would read poetry in the mornings to just kind of open up my brain in terms of like what you could do with structure, and like, well, it was liberating. It sort of liberated me in terms of form, and I felt like that meant that I could be playful.
It's so interesting, because I was listening to an interview with Benjamin Myers, you know, who wrote the Gallows Pole, and someone said to him, what would you advice to anyone wanting to write? And he said, read poetry. I'm so glad that you've told me that, because I always say that, so I'm not crazy. There's something really powerful, I think, about poetry, and the fact that it's so condensed, you know, they're doing so much with so little. It makes you think about form in a slightly different way, and it makes you think about what you can do with language. And do you think that that's easier to do in a shorter piece than it is like to use that kind of poetry in something shorter than it is in something bigger? I mean, how do you find the difference?
Well, it depends.
Making the two.
I mean, it depends. I mean, I would say Butterfly Fish is very poetic, and that's a longer work. But definitely it lends itself to short stories or short pieces. You know, so for example, the opening piece in Nudibranch. I mean, is it a story or is it a long poem? You know what I mean? It's debatable.
Experimental, isn't it?
Exactly. So, but it felt like the right form for it. You know, it felt like what I was trying to say with that piece, that writing it in that way just kind of really suited it, you know. So, but reading poetry enabled me to do that. You know what I mean? So I do.
Do you have favourites?
I mean, loads of people, but my favourite probably is a writer called June Jordan, Black American writer and poet, and I found her poetry has a kind of real sharpness to it. And again, sometimes the sentences are surprising, but she was also, bisexual, very political, just a really interesting writer, and I think not somebody who's talked about a lot. And also
I'll definitely look her up.
I think you'd like her work. But I love her writing. Toni Morrison.
Yeah, well, it'd be hard not to like Toni Morrison.
But again, Toni Morrison, we talk about the impact of her work, like socio-politically and culturally, but people don't talk enough about how experimental the writing actually is.
Agree.
I feel like in terms of craft,
it's amazing.
It's incredible what she's done. We're so lucky to have that body of work. And you can tell again from reading her work that she read poetry, that she read really widely, because the language and the work is so rich. It's so vivid, but yet she has such control.
It's terrifying, really. And every time I think of Beloved, I just think how wonderful and terrifying it is all at the same time.
All at the same time, and it's a book that you just don't forget about. A mother having to make that decision. It's just devastating, devastating book. But a lot of her work is like that, I love poetry, and I would highly Sylvia Plath as well.
Yes. I know, weirdly, what was it? The one that I can't get rid of is her something about her blacks crackle and drag, and there's another. Anyway, yes, mellifluous is one of the words that she uses all the time.
Yes, mellifluous.
That just stays in your head. And you're right. How these things. Well, everything you absorb is there with you, isn't it? When you put your pen on the page,
it stays with you, and then it just it manifests in a different way. I often also like to go to art exhibitions because I just love seeing the imagery. And again, that you absorb that, and that transforms in a completely different way. So whatever, I always say to writers, whatever it is that excites you, it might be literature, it might be other things, feed yourself those things, and there's people that do things that excite you, that do things with the work that excite you, because that will give you the confidence to feel like, oh, okay, maybe I could do something interesting too. And
confidence and permission are key things.
And permission, absolutely. When I was... I love books, but, often didn't see books by Black British writers, which is a real issue. But, thank goodness for the Bernardine Evaristos, the Leonie Rosses, the Alex Wheatles, the Okojie Newlands, and they sort of really blazed the trail.
Which is hopefully still going to get bigger.
This is what we're hoping, but kind of seeing them and what they did was really, really encouraging, and I kind of, I wanted to do my own thing as well, be in amongst them.
And do you feel spread the word was an important part of that?
They were great. They were really, I think without them in the beginning, I'm not sure I would have been able to access, the literary space or the literary community in the way that I was able to, because you're quietly writing, and you don't know, like, who do I should work to, who do I talk to about it. But they were running a mentoring scheme at the time, like years ago, for young writers in London, young writers and poets. And I submitted again last minute. Didn't really think anything would come of it, but then they got in touch saying, "Oh, you're one of the writers we've selected. Would you like to come in to have an interview?" So I came in. And then the writer that they paired me with, I had been reading her book that summer, which I loved. It was a writer called Donna Daly Clark, and she wrote this book called Lazy Eye, again about the family.
Oh yes, Lazy Eye.
I love that book. A lot of people don't know it when I say it, but you know it. It's a great book.
Wow. So
so
that
she
was one of those
mentored me.
massive coincidences.
It was just like serendipity. I was like, okay, this means something. I've been carrying this book around me all summer, and I loved it so much. And I said to myself, oh God, I'd love to meet this writer. And then, I got paired up with her, and she was great. She was no nonsense, no crap, really passionate. And I think we had a good chemistry. I think that's really key.
Yes, I totally agree. You can't really plan that in advance,
you can't. You kind of just have to see if you have it, and then you work on the relationship. But she was very clever at keeping me writing, very, very clever. You know,
which I guess is the
Yeah.
biggest challenge, isn't it? Is to make sure that you're still making the work.
This is it, and still,
Yeah.
and then having people who make you excited, who've done it,
Yeah.
is really important, because then you think it's possible, you know. And we would meet every couple of months to kind of have, you know, have a drink or over tea or coffee. And each time she would say, oh, you know, I think maybe we should talk about you getting an agent. Let's talk about. She said, if you write some more stuff, we'll talk about you. And then I would go away and be super excited and write, and then come back and I go, oh, you know, you said you'd introduce me to agents, and then she'd say, well, we're not quite there yet, but maybe a residency might be good. So she would have all these things.
Oh, but she sounds fantastic.
Oh, it was really, she was so good, really, really good. And she got me writing, you know, and then would send me stuff as well over email, like, oh, I think maybe you should go to this, or maybe you should go to this talk, or I think, you know, this might be a nice opportunity for you. Why don't you think about
That's
applying
so
for
helpful.
that? And it really helped. And then, of course, through that, there was an anthology as part of it.
Yeah.
We got to perform at the South Bank Centre.
Yeah.
We got to do a week at Arvon. So we got a lot out of it.
Yes.
So they cleverly just created this bubble.
Brilliant though, and really important.
Yeah, really, really important. But you know, lots of people who've gone on to do really well were part of that.
Yep.
So like Dean Atta,
Yep.
I think Inyo Ellams was part of it as well. He's a really good playwright. Jasmine Kure, excellent poet. Speaking of poets,
Okay.
yeah, she's so talented. I mean, I'm not sure if she's still writing now, but at the time,
Yeah.
I thought she was a really exciting voice. I really, really liked her work a lot. So yeah.
You've talked a little bit, I was going to ask you about inspirations, and you've mentioned a couple, but is there anyone else that is like a really big inspiration?
Yeah, I mean, I love Miranda July's work. That collection, the first collection that she wrote, and she's also a filmmaker as well. So I find her quite fascinating because she straddles different mediums, and they all seem to feed into each other. But
I feel like you could do film.
Oh, that's me. I love film. Funny enough, I absolutely love film. I never stop talking about movies, you know, because I watch a lot of films.
Yes.
Again, this thing about being influenced, because people often say your writing is very filmic, but
that's a visual thing, isn't it? That when you said it's about making images, if you can see things clearly, if you can express what you're seeing, then I think it does feel filmic.
Absolutely.
It's there in your eyes.
And you're being, you know, you're feeding yourself. And I just love what she does. And that collection, it was just so strange and so funny, but so human, you know, and it really spoke to me. And I love the space that she occupied. And I was writing, again, this thing about permission, I was writing my weird little stories and just looking for permission because I was like, well, how are people going to receive my stories? You know, I wasn't sure. But then when I would read stuff like Miranda July, Shirley Jackson as well, who's a brilliant writer, you know, I would be encouraged because I thought, well, there's a space for me here.
Have you read that? Now I can't think of her name now, but you know, Her Body in Other Parties. Have you read that collection?
Carmen Maria Mercado.
Yeah.
Again, a great collection.
It is, isn't it?
Fantastic collection. I got that collection. I think it came out 2 years ago, actually. So I have that. So I really, work like that is just right up my street. And you know, Leonie Ross as well, who's awesome. I really like her stuff. And funny enough, years ago, I read her books and I thought, God, this is a really, really talented Black British writer. And then we connected, funny enough, when I was first writing Butterfly Fish, she actually fed back on it. And and said, you know, keep writing. There are a few things here and there you need to look at, but you're really talented. And that meant so much to me. And so it's just really, really nice to like get that encouragement because it means that you just keep going. So I feel like that's what people need to do is do the work, feed yourself, but also don't be afraid to show it to people who can help you. Don't be afraid to find, you know, people that can facilitate that next step for you. Because if you connect to, say, a Leonie Ross or whoever, and they like what you do and you keep getting better and better and better, they might say, oh, you should talk to that agent. That agent's looking for new writers, or, you know.
But so do you think now that you have had all this wonderful praise and these prizes and you're part of the Royal Society for Literature, do you feel that now that's your job a little bit?
I do think that that's really important.
Yeah.
And I mentor a couple of people behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And I think so because, you know, people like Bernadine
Yes.
were really supportive of me, and I think community is important, but I do it quietly. I don't make a lot of noise about it.
A bit like the metamorphosis theme is quiet interest.
Yeah, I don't, because I just think you should just do it. And
I agree, and
do you know what I mean?
not
And
kind of say, hey everyone,
and
look what
like,
I'm
look
doing.
what I'm doing, do
Yeah.
it. Like, just get on with it.
Yeah,
you
I hear what
know,
you're
loads
saying.
of people do it and don't make a fuss about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if I didn't get that support, I would never have had the confidence, you know, to keep writing, especially the kind of stuff I write. You
Yeah.
know, and like with Donna's writing is completely different to mine, but she still had a real.
it.
She
Yeah.
still saw something in it and had a real appreciation and said, well, you just need to keep going, you know.
So the next one that is a novel, and it's coming out with the same
Publisher.
publisher. And it's kind of like your publisher before, who are fabulous, are more independent.
Yeah, because I think they're taking risk with writers,
Yes.
so...
And publishing actually some really
And
exciting
publishing-
work that isn't being taken elsewhere.
Exactly, so
Yeah.
that's the thing. I mean, I'm not sure... We sent my work to big publishing houses the first time round, and a lot of them said, oh, the work's great and it's really different, but no. You know what I mean? They didn't want to take the risk.
Yes.
They didn't want to take the risk, but an independent publishing house did, Jacaranda.
Yeah, I know
But-
Jacaranda is brilliant.
And you know,
Yeah.
Valerie was a massive champion
Yeah.
of my work, and really, especially the stories. She absolutely loved the stories. But she was clever. She said, I love the stories and the book's amazing. So, you know, I want both of them. Because I initially thought that they would just publish the stories
Yes.
and we'd get the novel published elsewhere.
Yeah.
But she said, no, I want them both. So,
Oh.
you know, it ended up
Yeah.
going to Jacaranda. But, you know, independent publishing houses, they're taking risks, they're doing amazing things. You know, they're providing platforms for writers that,
Yeah.
you know, may not necessarily get them. But
So tell me about the next book. When is it going to be out?
So the next book, which I'm working on, it's not going to be out till next year.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm excited about it. I tend not to talk too much about
Okay, well
books
don't say too much
books
then.
when I'm working on them, because it's like I almost feel like you give the power away.
I kind of understand what
do,
you mean.
do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it is a novel. It
Yeah.
is a bigger book. It will be my second novel.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I know. It's like, God, I've got to
Two
do
collections
it.
and two novels.
Yeah. So I'm excited. I'm just hoping that, you know, I think the expectation, the gulf between what the writer expects and what
Yeah.
comes on the page is often, it can be a challenge,
Yeah.
you know, so kind of finding my way through that process.
And do you have thoughts for the next one?
No, I'm not going to think about that. I get so many ideas all the time.
Yeah.
I have to write my ideas down.
Yeah.
I'm always getting ideas for stories. But then I'll get distracted, you know, because people are saying, oh, you know, people want to commission you to write stuff.
Yes.
And I'm having to say no to some,
Yeah.
which I always feel really bad about, because it's just so lovely that people are interested in you, you know,
Yes.
but I'm having to say no because I need to concentrate on this
Yeah.
novel,
Yeah.
you know.
That's
so,
a good position to be in.
yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
I guess so. I can't complain about that. But yeah, so I'm kind of trying to enjoy working on the novel. But of course, the collection's still fairly new.
Yeah.
So it's that thing of like.
It is weird, isn't it? How
Yeah.
you write something and then it takes quite a long time for it to actually come in front of other people
Yeah.
in the published sense.
Yeah,
So
and
that
then
can be
but
quite weird.
your head
You've
is on
moved
the
on.
next piece of work, and then you have
Yeah.
to talk about that, and people say things to you, and you know, is this what you meant by that sentence?
Do you remember?
And do you remember? And you're like.
I mean, but just some of the things from this book, you know, like odd babies eating fertilizer, and you know, I mean, there's just so much going on in there. That's just pretty much covers every topic you can think of.
Well, my
great.
headspace is like, my imagination, I guess, is crazy. David Lynch is one of my favourite directors, and I guess that sort of makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. But I think also the story about the saints as well. I feel like I just want to keep going back to that story because it's actually quite a complex, like, and there's so much going on in it, and just that whole it makes me think of Flaubert and that whole idea of the saint being.
Oh, that's a compliment.
I mean Angela Carter. I mean, there's just loads of people that I feel are in what you're doing, and
thank you so much.
yeah, I I wish I had a bigger voice to share yours, but I really thank you very much for coming to talk to me.
No, it's such a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Everyone go out and buy all of her work, but this is the new one. On its second round of printing, which is very cool.
Exciting.
So yeah, just thank you very much for speaking to me, and I really look forward to seeing the next book.
Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you so much.